Jazzcast Pros.
Imagine making $200,000 this year. For many of us earlier on in our journey as an entrepreneur, hitting six figures, hitting $200,000 would be like such a milestone for us. Now imagine losing $200,000 an hour for an entire quarter. That is what happened to the company we're going to talk about today. They ended up doing a huge movie around it, the company WeWork. And today we are going to talk about the rise and the fall of WeWork. They are still around, but they are not the same company as they were in 2019. And then we're going to take the lessons that we can learn from WeWork and how we can incorporate those into our businesses as small business owners, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. Welcome to High Vibe Table Talks, the podcast to help you, the current or aspiring solopreneur, navigate the messy middle so you can make both an income and an impact. Hi, I'm Rashawn, and I love creating safe spaces for women to be courageous in their dreams. After spending a decade working in sales for a startup and talking with hundreds of other women entrepreneurs, I know it can be lonely, but you can do this. We are having impactful conversations with people walking similar paths to you, so pull up a seat. This is High Vibe Table Talks. A quick little nugget, my outside. I don't know how well it's going to come through in the audio, but it might sound a little bit different today, and that is because I am filming outside. And I want to be super vulnerable here because I think that's part of what this journey is for me and why it's important to you as listeners. Part of why I'm filming outside or recording outside today is because of my own discomfort. My husband is a teacher, and him and my daughter, this is their first official day of summer vacation. School just ended, and he is watching TV in the room outside of where I typically record, and it feels super uncomfortable to record in front of him. So I decided to take it outside today. So if you hear some different noises, that is why. It is me being uncomfortable, even though I want thousands and tens of thousands of you to listen to this episode. I don't want my husband to hear me as I'm recording. It's just something that I'm still uncomfortable with. So here we are. Let's get into this episode about WeWork. A little bit of statistics about WeWork. It was founded in 2010 by Adam Newman and Miguel McKelvey. And the idea behind it is similar to things that I really believe in, and it's flexible, community-driven co-working spaces. And so if you walked in, it was all about being a vibe. Like from what I have read, there were like ping pong tables and coffee bars and happy hours and big open spaces and whiteboards, and people would go for the vibe, whether they were solopreneurs or I do believe that some companies used them and let their workers work there, which I'm all about. I think is so cool. There's co-work in the name of my business because I believe in community building around business and entrepreneurship. And they just wanted a very cool vibe. And so they weren't just selling you this desk, this space for you to come put your headphones on and work. They wanted a real sense of community. They wanted you to go there and feel comfortable and leave on cloud nine, very much in the idea of collaboration. Like, yes, you can go and get a desk and like sit down and get all your work done, but wouldn't your work be so much better if you did it in an environment that uplifted you, that made you feel better, that gave you different energy, that sparked your creativity? And so by 2019, WeWork had expanded to over 110 cities and signed really long-term leases on premium real estate. I mean, they were in the most expensive cities in America. And in order to make sense for people to go there, they had to be in places that were easy to get to. And that year they had a valuation of $47 billion. $47 billion is what they were valuated at because they were about to go public. And they had also even started to pivot into other kind of verticals like We Live, which are shared apartments, We Grow, which is a private school, and just seeing where else they could take this, like we, fill in the blank with community, collaboration, creativity, all of these things that are really, really great. And I fully support. But they started to file for their IPO in August of 2019. And in order to do that, they have to, kind of go behind the curtains and say, like, look at your P&L, your profits and losses, and say, like, what is actually going on? What are you spending money on? What is actually bringing in revenue? Because these shareholders, like, now you are going to be reliable to them. And if you say that this stock is worth $27, then we have to know that's because the company is profitable. And from what I have read and understand is Newman was spending a lot of money on his own stuff. And, when I started this episode, I talked about losing money. And, when they really looked at his revenue versus losses, there were quarters where he was losing more than $200,000 an hour. What they were having to pay for this premium real estate in these very expensive cities versus what was coming in based on the community at the end of the day wasn't not only not making money, it was losing so much money. There was some conflict of interest, like the CEO was leasing buildings back to his own company. He, trademarked the We name and then sold that back to his own company. So there was a lot of like shady stuff that he was doing. From what I understand, he was a very charismatic person and so can walk in and charm a room and like leave everybody feeling like this is a great idea. This is the next best thing. Like everything is going incredible. Look at all these buildings that we have. Look at all these people that are coming and look at all the great work that they're doing. But as I always say, data over drama. And when the public went to go look at his P&L and what was actually going on, the data was not adding up. So Newman was forced to resign in 2019, and he walked away with a reported $1.7 billion in a SoftBank, which was one of the investors into WeWork, an exit package. And so SoftBank invested a total of $18.5 billion into WeWork over time and really attempted to turn around this business, cut a lot of costs. I'm sure it closed a lot of buildings and really trimmed the fat that was losing, again, that hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour in the business that he built. In November of 2023, WeWork officially filed for bankruptcy in the US. And at the time, the company had listed over $18.6 billion in debt. The stock was delisted from the New York Stock Exchange with the shares worth mere cents. And so, in some of my previous episodes, if this is your first episode of the series, make sure you go back and listen because we've talked about a lot of different businesses in really different genres and different markets and different reasons of why they failed. And this was another one that happened like really fast, and they were founded in 2010. In 2012, just 2 years later, they were valued at $97 million. In 2014, they were valued at $1.5 billion. So just in those 2 years, they got over the billion-dollar mark. And then in 2019, so 5 years later, they went from $1.5 billion to $47 billion. And within that year, just having to peel back the curtain, they went from $47 billion valuation to the CEO resigning in September of 2019. And then in 2023, so just 4 years later, they filed for bankruptcy, even though SoftBank was investing billions of dollars and trying to do what they could to salvage the company. Now we're going to dive into the lessons. You can kind of see a glimpse. There is a movie out there about this. So if you do want to do a deeper dive, understand more about this, the movie is really good, really interesting, and worth a watch if this is interesting to you. But what can we learn from this? What can we understand about the success and failures of WeWork and why, in a matter of less than a decade, went from founding to worth $47 billion to filing for bankruptcy, which is a pretty wild thing to happen over the course of an entrepreneur's lifespan. A decade is really not a long time. I really think that if you're an entrepreneur under 3 years, you're a baby entrepreneur, and like real expansion happens in that 5 to 10 year when you're really like, okay, I can finally like make an understanding. And so all of that to happen in a decade is just crazy. But what can we as entrepreneurs who will probably never have an IPO or be on the New York Stock Exchange or probably see the billion next to our worth or our valuation, but what can we learn from it? Lesson number one is growth doesn't always mean success. This was something similar to what Target did. Is Target went in Canada and decided to open 130 locations in a span of like 14 months and wasn't able to course correct a Titanic that quickly because they were just opening so fast and so quickly. And so, more success, being bigger, having a better launch doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be more successful. If you had this launch and your goal is to sell $100,000 worth in merchandise, and then all of a sudden you realize that it's more expensive to ship to Canada than you had originally anticipated, and you have all these orders that come in from Canada, and now your profit margin was small and now it's nothing or in the negative because of what it costs to ship there. Well, all of a sudden this $100,000 launch is not very successful, and you're taking money out of your own pocket to ship these things because it's much more expensive. Whereas if you're like, okay, I'm going to launch it in this small area, or I'm going to launch a couple, or I'm going to send some free to different people just to like understand the process, that makes a big difference. And also, like, if you have this launch and all these orders are coming in and you're up, let's say 15 hours a day just packing orders, is that really success? Like, okay, you had this wonderful launch of all these orders coming in, but is it sustainable? Like, is it worth it? Kind of another thing that I see a lot in business and a lot of conversations that are happening is, oh, look at this, $10,000 launch that I had. I've been having $20,000 months for the past year. All these like claims. And obviously, like, we are now in a season where we have more IQ when it comes to what's being put on the internet. And so are a lot of those claims true? Probably not, because people can say whatever they want. But let's say they do show their numbers and they're like, yeah, I had 1,000 people sign up at $10 a thing. And so I had a $10,000 launch. And they spent $9,000 in ads. And they hired someone to do their SEO, and they hired someone to do their ad copy, and they, whatever, all of a sudden, the cost they put in to get that $10,000 launch either made them very little money, cost them money. It wasn't really this like huge profitable thing that they're claiming that it was. They know, if they're a good entrepreneur, they know what their profit and loss was. They know what the ROI of those ads are. They know all those things. Even these people who are like, oh, look at me, I'm filling up my cohort, I'm filling up this, there's very few spots left, Does that actually mean that they are successful? And for a lot of them, the answer is no. So there's two prongs, I think, to this particular lesson. And the first one is take what people are saying on the internet with a grain of salt, which we all know, but also like if you see these people talking about these launches and that makes you feel bad about yourself, like, don't unfollow them, block them, unsubscribe, whatever it needs to be. And the second piece is like, even if that's something that you wanted, are you in a position where that sort of growth would be successful for you? And I do want to dive a little bit deeper into that in lesson 3. So lesson number 2, I talked about this a little bit earlier. Know your numbers. Know your numbers. You should not be losing that much money day after day, week after week, hour after hour, month after month. There are going to be times where you have to invest and you have to put money in, like you have to spend money to make money, that sort of idea. But there has to be ROI behind it. There has to be a reason. You have to know your numbers. And know what's coming in, what's going out, and kind of that 80-20 rule, like what is the 20% that makes you 80% of your profit, and how can you really dive into that? A lot of entrepreneurs, like, they get emotionally attached to certain offerings. I mean, we all have been there where you've put this thing out and it's your baby. You work so hard on it, and maybe like it doesn't resonate, or it doesn't have the impact that you thought, or not as many people buy as you thought. And it can feel like a personal attack. And first of all, it's not. Like, it is not personal, And can you take lessons from that? And let's say you do have something that's really successful, but it doesn't feel like your baby, or you're like, oh, well, this didn't work, so let me put out something else. And you're just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall versus being like, what part of this didn't work? Did I not have it in front of enough eyes? Did I not talk about it enough? Is it too expensive? Do I need to change my SEO? Is there a part of the customer experience that they're not enjoying that I can change? And like I said before, data over drama. So it's not about like people hate me and that's why they're not buying this product, which is where a lot of us go, me included. As someone who can't even record her podcast in front of her husband, like, this is hard. Vulnerability is hard. And so knowing your numbers, knowing what works, knowing what doesn't, and zeroing in on those, that's what you can control. And that's where I think that WeWork, like, once that curtain was peeled back, people were like, oh shit, this isn't the company that I thought it was. This is not the type of stock I want to invest in. This isn't the type of company that needs to go public. And so being able to lift back that curtain for yourself and being able to make decisions based on that is really, really important. All right. Lesson number 3, stay rooted in reality. WeWork really sold this image. They sold this vibe, this feeling, this, oh, everyone's going to come here and it's going to feel so cool. And like, we're just going to make all this money because like, it just feels so good to be here. And again, I have co-work and I have vibe in my name. Like, I'm not saying that those are bad things, but is your model built to last? Can this be sustainable? In lesson number 1, we talked growth doesn't necessarily equal success. And let's say you do have a $10,000 launch and you continue to keep up with that pace. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to have the sort of lifestyle that you have to produce whatever it is you're producing to have a $10,000 month every single month? And so, WeWork was able to have these big splashy openings that like, oh, all these people would come and it'd be so great. Everyone would talk about how wonderful it was. But then when it came down to month after month, did the numbers make sense? And the answer was no. And so having an office in Manhattan didn't make sense because not enough people were coming to that to offset all the cost that goes into having an office space in Manhattan. And so that business model was just not built to last. Another piece that I want to plug in here is I talk a lot about building a business that supports you and your lifestyle, not finding pockets of space for your life that go around your business. My daughter was watching TV the other day and it was talking about that sort of proverb around a man had an empty jar and he filled it with the big rocks and then some smaller rocks and then sand and then water, and the importance of building in the big things and the important things first, filling your cup, filling your life with the big important things first. Because if you fill it with all the small stuff, the sand and the pebbles first, there's no room for the big stuff. And I want to remind us of that proverb when it comes to your business. And so staying rooted in reality means like, what is important to you in your life? What do you want your life to look like? And make sure that you're building a business model that supports that. Again, if you have a $10,000 launch and you're filling all these orders and they just continue to come in and you're missing important milestones, or you're exhausted and you're snapping at people, or you're losing sight of the things that are important to you, is that what you want to continue to grow? I'll go back to growth doesn't always equal success. Like, you could have a really successful company and never see your friends or family. You can have a really successful company and start sleeping so little or are constantly stressed out that like your lifestyle is now just in the tank and you have nothing left to give and you're missing important moments. And the people who support you, like, not that they feel like they can't, but they don't, they have lost touch with you. And so staying rooted in that, I think, is really important. And so just remembering to build your business around the lifestyle you want to live, not the other way around. And lesson number 4, this will be my last one, is remember to decouple your brand and your ego. From what I have read, Adam Newman's downfall wasn't part his ego. Like, he believed in his vision. He believed in himself. He believed in this euphoria that he had built in his brain, that he cut out anybody who was like a no person. He was just surrounded by yes people who were enamored by his ego, by his aura, by his vision. Anybody who tried to peel back the curtain, they were like, you don't get it. You don't understand it. Like, I'm not listening to you. So detaching our ego from the data, from what's actually going on, from what reality is actually happening in front of us is a fatal flaw. And Adam Newman saw that. And so staying coachable, staying grounded, making sure that if your business does need to evolve around your original vision, that's okay. I've talked a lot of times on this podcast about my pivots as still a relatively new entrepreneur and with much smaller scale than something like WeWork, but understanding that I had to pivot for myself, for my audience, what the feedback I was getting. And as I've said in a lot of these, like, really remember that you are driving a speedboat. You're not driving the Titanic, and pivots are okay. Pivots are important, and you have to listen as you go through that. When thinking about our business, what's at its core is you and your vision and what's important to you. And every season, your offerings will look like different prongs on the wheel. And so if you're pivoting from one prong to another, there's no failure in that. You're not like a loser. It's not bad. It wasn't a horrible reason for you to go down that. It's just a new season, a new offering, a new prong on the wheel, which we all have, and we have to embrace it and celebrate it. So if this was your first episode of listening to why big businesses failed and what we need to learn around them, go back and listen to the other ones in the series. I did one on Kodak. I did one on Target in Canada. And I did one on Blockbuster versus Netflix, which was really, really fun. I am also going to be doing kind of the flip side of the series, which I think is going to be really fun. So stay tuned, because it's going to be big businesses that did pivot during critical moments that led to them continuing to be successful, and what we can learn from those. That's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this series, and I'm excited about the next part of the series. And remember that big dreams and small steps can transform your life.